Hey, what's up guys? In today's video, we are going to be going over WL Muhammad's games. He's currently number 5 in the world on his main account with HoggyQ, and he has kindly agreed to push his second account live for us. The games you're about to witness are unbelievably high level, and so in this video I hope to explain his plays and make you understand not only HoggyQ better, but Clash Royale as a whole. The matchups this time are amazing as well. For game 1 we have Golem Beatdown, game 2 is Electro Giant, game 3 is Drill Cycle, game 4 is Mega Knight, game 5 is Boss Bandit Ram Rider, game 6 is Hyperbait, game 7 is Recruits Fireball Bait, game 8 is against Golem Vines, and finally game 9 is against Royal Pigs Lightning. Focus up and let's get right into this breakdown. So WL Muhammad is playing against this really broken Golem deck, and what I really want you guys to pay attention to is this E-Spirit. Now you might be wondering what's so significant about the E-Spirit. It didn't really do anything, but it's really about what WL Muhammad was trying to do with the E-Spirit. I'll show you guys here. If a Goblin Machine approaches your tower, you can actually let it get to your tower, then use an E-Spirit to activate your King Tower from one of the rockets. It's a really useful interaction and can really help you win matchups like this. That was a nice bar barrel that WL Muhammad just played. It forced out the opponent's bar barrel. He knew that the opponent had to go for his guards. And the last 4 cards the opponent used were Vines, bar barrel, guards, and mini P.E.K.K.A. So that means that the opponent doesn't really have a good way of dealing with a Mighty Miner at the bridge. So WL Muhammad does that, and then he goes for his Earthquake immediately onto the skeletons, just so that he can make sure that Evo Witch dies. I mean, this is like a 500 IQ play. I mean, that's the kind of thing that Riley would do, where you need to know their exact hand and know how to punish it. So really, really intelligent plays so far, and the opponent goes for a Golem. So, as always, you pressure opposite lane. Opponent spends 8 elixir in the back, they don't have elixir, so you go for this hog opposite lane, get a bunch of damage, and now you have to defend. So he goes for this cannon. I guys want you to learn this cannon placement. It's something I've learned, and this is sort of a new cannon placement I guess hog players have been using to defend specifically this Golem deck. And now it's time for the big defense. So E-Spirit up high, Mighty Miner first, then Bar Barrel, and then he pops the ability. Notice how the Bar Barrel was hitting the mini P.E.K.K.A. the whole time? Because in this defense, by far the hardest thing to deal with is the mini P.E.K.K.A. Because you know, if you use skeletons or anything, usually the baby dragon hits it, and then the mini P.E.K.K.A. just deletes everything and goes straight to your tower. By the way, notice how he again went instantly for a hog after he defended, because he knew his opponent didn't have mini P.E.K.K.A. since he already used it on offense. Here as well is important. So he does use the bar barrel onto the flying machine to keep his furnace alive, and that just allows him to apply dual lane pressure. And you're going to notice how important it is that he does apply dual lane pressure in this matchup, because you never want to let your opponent build too big of a push. So he goes in instantly. Look at this. He goes for hog, furnace, skeletons, all with his Mighty Miner, which he popped the ability for. And that was all because he knew that because the opponent went for a witch, as you can just saw, he can easily counter a witch with a bar barrel for a +3 elixir trade. And so if he goes really aggressive opposite lane, then the opponent won't support the witch. So he just got a free 3 elixir and tons of damage. Again, instantly went for a hog opposite lane, didn't go into the flying machine, into the goblin machine. Now he goes for a furnace opposite lane in the back because he wants the opponent to spend elixir defending it. One of the beautiful things about the furnace is that the longer it's on the field, the more fire spirits it's spawning, and the more annoying it is for the opponent. Here he goes for an E-Spirit, you can see, just to get rid of the skeleton, so that the opponent has to then respond to the furnace. Then look, the opponent now is forced to waste his mini P.E.K.K.A. So he pops the ability, Mighty Miner ability, distract the goblin machine, goes for a hog. Beautiful Evo cannon at the bridge to get that hog hit, and then it's just EQ range. Insanely well played game. So next up, WL Muhammad is playing against Electro Giant, and this is not the most common deck in the meta, but it is, I do still see it from time to time, and it's actually not as straightforward to beat as you'd think, especially with Evo Cage, which always just sucks in your Hog Rider, and then if they have Tornado, well, you're going to see how to beat it. So he goes for a Mighty Miner first play, and I think that's not usually the most ideal starting play, but it's also not the end of the world. He uses Mighty Miner ability, and if you're wondering why, well, there's no point letting it die to the Brawler. He's going to have to go for his Bar Barrel anyway to defend this Ice Wizard, and by using the ability, he forced out the opponent's Berserker. So overall, it was a good ability, right? Opponent used 2 elixir, you use 1 elixir. Goes for a Furnace in the back, and then the opponent goes for a Lightning. Yeah, he goes for a Lightning, and the Lightning is kind of a giveaway that this is E-Giant, because really no other deck uses this combination of cards. He goes in instantly and then immediately goes for this Mighty Miner opposite lane. It would have been a really good Mighty Miner opposite lane, but the opponent went for this cage like in the middle, And so if it wasn't so much in the middle, then this Mighty Miner would be going to the tower, and then you could pop the Mighty Miner bomb and probably get some damage. But overall, I don't think that was the best Mighty Miner, just because of the opponent's cage placement. Skeletons fully counters Goblin Brawler, if you guys didn't know. He just cycles E-Spirit anyway, but if you play it up high, your Skeletons, it can fully counter a Goblin Brawler. So he's just cycled his Furnace. You can notice how he now swapped lanes, because he doesn't want to give his opponent Lightning value again. Nice bar barrel, really nice bar barrel, right? Just pulls everything back. And the Furnace is just staying alive. You want to try and protect your Furnaces as much as possible, because the longer they're alive, you know, the more value they get. Goes for a Mighty Miner, and then obviously pops the bomb, because it's not going to do anything against an E-Giant. It's just going to lose all of its HP without doing any damage. So he at least forces a cage out from the opponent, and at the same time, his Furnace, now plus a cannon, just fully takes care of the Electro Giant. Also, by changing lanes and making the opponent spend 4 elixir, the opponent couldn't then back up or support the Electro Giant. So again, really nice. Opponent does mess up his Nado here, which is really good for him. He does get a nice hog hit. Goes for a Mighty Miner opposite lane. Why does he go for a Mighty Miner opposite lane? Because he doesn't want to give the opponent too much lightning value on both a Mighty Miner and a Furnace. He knows that any time he plays his Furnace, especially an Evo Furnace, it's just going to get lightninged. So there's no point going for it in the same lane. Plus, this whole time, he has 3-card cycle, because he had his Mighty Miner down the entire time. So if you're wondering, like, how do you break through a building and tornado, like, it's really tough. Really, the way to do it is just having really good defense and just using your 3-card cycle. Just keep cycling as many hogs as possible, and don't give them lightning and spell value. So here he goes for a hog, right? Opponent played E-Giant on the back, go for a hog opposite lane. Sure, the opponent is now defending, but now look how many troops are now on the left lane and not helping out this E-Giant. So an E-Giant basically gets full countered by a cannon, if you guys didn't know. And so if the opponent has no support troops behind it, look, he cycled 2 hogs in the time that he was defending 1 E-Giant. And now 2 cannons as well. So that's kind of what you want to do, is just pressure opposite lane as much as possible, and don't let them build up these massive pushes. Again, really nice bar barrel. Why does he go for his Furnace in this placement? So the top 2 tiles, your opponent can't Lightning the tower and the Evo Furnace, so which is why he went for it right at the bridge. That Fire Spirit was really clutch. It made the cage, you know, pop instantly with the Earthquake. So his hog actually managed to get to the tower, and then got nadoed. Then he goes for Skeletons, Berserker, just everything down low. You see how spaced out the cannon is? It's like, this is the normal placement, but if you guys are newer to playing cannon as a card, that's the cannon placement against beatdown decks. He now uses really nice Mighty Miner. In general, in this meta, and just in general anyway, against baby dragons, you want to be using a Mighty Miner as the tank. You know, and then you can always pop the bomb. Actually, that's a pro tip I want to give. That's something I learned just from watching a bunch of pros, is that very often you'll see, and you've already seen throughout the video, is that he often goes for his Mighty Miner for the baby dragons and then pops the ability, so that it goes opposite lane and the ability does quite a lot of damage to a baby dragon. Okay, this defense is nuts. So he cycled 2 cannons. Everything's, you know, he's got the Furnaces on the outside. So your range cards you play on the outside, your cannon you have to play in the middle, and you play your tanks as much as possible in the middle as well. Just so that your range cards can never get lightninged with your cannon. So he goes for, you know, bar barrel. He's basically just abusing 3-card cycle. There's too much here to like try and microanalyze. It's mainly just, okay, this was a really nice, really nice Earthquake. Basically just buying himself as much time as possible for his cards, because EQ slows everything down, and then if you have triple elixir, you're just buying yourself like 3 elixir if you wait 1 elixir worth of time. But anyway, crazy game. Next up, we have a game against Thete, and Thete is one of the best Goblin Drill players in the world. Goblin Drill is generally a pretty tough matchup to beat, so I'm quite excited to share with you guys how he plays this game. It's pretty beautiful, and you'll see kind of a lot of interesting things. So he just defended the drill, nothing special so far, and the opponent responds with a Mighty Miner in the same lane. Now this is really important. WL Muhammad goes for his Furnace in the back, opposite lane. Now you might be, yeah, he misclicked an Earthquake, but you might be wondering, okay, why did he go for a Furnace opposite lane? Well, think about it. If your opponent played a Mighty Miner in the back and you go for a Furnace same lane, all of your Fire Spirits are going to jump onto the Mighty Miner, and the Mighty Miner is just going to tank all of them and you'll get no value from it. Whereas if you go for opposite lane, well, now there's nothing in the lane, so either they have to tank a bunch of Fire Spirits and just take thousands of damage to your tower, which no one's going to do, by the way. What you're really hoping for is that the opponent then has to spend elixir to defend it. So whether they play a cannon, they play a log, they play a skeletons, whatever it is, you're now forcing out elixir continuously. It's why the furnace is so strong. The longer it's on the field and the more unobstructed it is, so the more you play opposite lane, basically, the more value it just keeps getting, because your opponent keeps being forced to play elixir in the opposite lane to where they really want to go. Okay, this is kind of important. Look at these skeletons. They fully counter wall breakers. I know the wall breakers were hit by an E-Spirit, but it's a really important interaction. It's a very simple interaction, but still, some players don't know it. You want to be going for skeletons onto wall breakers because you can fully counter them. Really important high cannon here, by the way, and high cannon is really strong against drill deck because you can notice your opponent has no range cards, so they actually have no way of dealing with the cannon. And so if the opponent goes for a Mighty Mine or they go for really anything, you'll just have like a turret at the bridge that can't be destroyed. The opponent will never fireball it either because they're going to save that fireball for the furnace. Okay, really important. He has a Mighty Miner on the field and goes for a Hog in the back. So let me just quickly explain Hog in the back as a play. When you go for it, you only ever go Hog in the back against cycle decks. Now, why cycle decks? Let's think about it. You only go for it against cycle decks because it's one of the only ways for you to be able to outcycle another deck that also has a really fast cycle. So if you go for a Hog in the back and your opponent goes for a cannon, which is usually the way that they defend it, you go for your win condition, they go for their counter. Or you can just Earthquake and then your Hog gets to the tower. If they don't go for a cannon, and they delay their cannon, let's say, till your Hog gets to the bridge, in that time you can cycle other cards so that by the time your cannon has died to the first, that your Hog has died to the first cannon, you're already back to another Hog and you can outcycle them. See? Genius plays. So that's the time, they're like the only times where you go for this really nice high Earthquake here. It forces out a drill on defense, and you can see that, look, now he's also had 3-card cycle. He's using it for both Hogs and furnaces. So now he has not only a Hog on the tower, but 2 furnaces. Again, goes for a Hog. You got to be aggressive. I mentioned this in one of my other videos, that depending on the matchup, you have to think about what you want to cycle. In this matchup, you need to be cycling your Hog Riders. It's not about stacking cannons. It's not about trying to cycle as many furnaces as you can. And sometimes that is the play, depending on the matchup, as you want to do one of those 2 things. In this matchup, it's just, can you keep cycling Hogs, forcing out the cannon, and then going Earthquake, and forcing out even more Elixir? If you're too passive in this matchup, you will just straight up lose. So you need to be very, very careful. Again, this is another thing. If your opponent goes for a cannon at the bridge, you can outrange it with a furnace, which has the same range as a musketeer, by playing it 3 tiles from the bridge. Little interaction tip, just so that, you know, you can, if somebody plays a furnace and it's not doing anything at the bridge, you can just snipe it. Once it's dead, go for a Hog. He's just stacking furnaces now and being a nuisance. You notice how he just waited for the opponent to fireball, because there's no point going for a Hog or anything. You know the opponent's going to fireball. Goes for a Hog, Earthquake. The opponent does Cannon Trick, which is nice. He's forced to go Skeletons plus Bar Barrel. Nice interaction. That does fully counter at least 1 Wall Breaker, but not both. Goes from, what, Mighty Miner? Again, you want to be making sure when your opponent has their Mighty Miner, as much as possible, you also have your Mighty Miner on the field. Why? So that if they have 3-card cycle, you have 3-card cycle. Because as much as you're trying to outcycle them, they are trying to outcycle you. Never forget that, right? You also, it's like when you're thinking about your own game strategy, think about their strategy as well. Like, his strategy is also to cycle as many drills as possible to try and outcycle you with 3-card cycle. And so if you can beat his strategy, well, then you'll win. So here okay, WL Muhammad, just beautiful. He managed to outcycle, goes for an Earthquake, and is really outplaying Thete, especially after such a bad start and miskicking an Earthquake. Just perfection. So GG's, beautifully well played game. So next up, we've got a game against Mega Knight, and I know a bunch of you guys have been asking me to cover this since it's a pretty frequent card in mid-ladder, so hopefully this gameplay analysis will help you. So what do we know so far? As opponent goes for a Goblin Gang, and we can see a Dagger Duchess. So at this point, I'm probably thinking it is going to be a log bait deck, but the opponent uses a Bandit, and so you probably know that it's going to be a Mega Knight bait deck. Uses a Mighty Miner ability onto the Bandit, just so it counters it, and then maybe the opponent also has to go for something to deal with the Mighty Miner. Look at this, how he uses his early Bar Barrel, right? He uses his Bar Barrel early so that the Queen then has to walk with its ability before getting to the tower. Goes for a nice cannon, then just E-Spirit, just to deal with the Prince. Nice little Bar Barrel onto the Goblin Gang, and he's defended. So, okay, what is the game strategy? First of all, kind of obviously you want to be going opposite lane, and you also want to make sure that you're not going for Hogs into their Mega Knight. His opponent's last few cards, by the way, were Bandit, Goblin Gang, Queen, and Prince, which means he actually, again, had nothing for a Mighty Miner in the back, and he gets this insane King Tower activation off the Bandit, and at the same time, the Mega Knight got rid of all of the Dagger Duchess's daggers, so his Hog gets 2 beautiful hits on the tower, even though there's a Mega Knight, and now he just has to defend. Goes for a Furnace and goes for a Cannon. Why does he not space it out more? Well, mainly because he doesn't need to. The opponent doesn't have a big spell. What do you call it? The Mega Knight bait doesn't run big spells. It only runs arrows and zap, and so you can very freely play it together, especially in single when the opponent doesn't have elixir to go for, you know, zap plus arrows. So Mega Knight again, Evo Mega Knight this time, uses the ability, which is kind of interesting, and you can notice how he used the ability because he doesn't want the opponent to build up too big of a push in one lane. Right now that Mega Knight is undefended, and he actually just tanks the damage. This is something I probably would never have done, but it actually makes a lot of sense. He just tanks the Mega Knight, goes for Skeletons and Evo Furnace, but instead of wasting these cards, you know, defending, just let him split the damage, and then you can go really aggressive, because now the opponent has to defend an Evo Furnace in one lane, and a Mega Knight Hog in another. A Mighty Miner Hog in another. So yeah, that was just really nice. I mean, you guys can see how he got so much damage. Earthquake onto the Goblin Gang. Goes for a Hog now. You see, he's applying lots of pressure whilst the Dagger Duchess also doesn't have any daggers remaining. And dude, he literally, I mean, this was the most perfect game of perfect games. He's beating a top 100 player like it's nothing. Crazy, crazy game. So for WL Muhammad's game for 2800, he's going to be playing against a Boss Bandit Ram Rider Evo Executioner Snowball deck. It's a bridge spam deck that's becoming increasingly popular in the meta and is actually very hard to deal with, so we're going to see what he does in this game. He goes for an E-Spirit in front of the Fire Spirit, which, you know, either makes the opponent have to respond to it or just take a ton of damage, which the opponent opts just to take the Fire Spirits, and man, that's 800 damage right there and then, so huge lead already just off of basically that E-Spirit play. Goes for a Mighty Miner opposite lane so that it gets more value than just cycling it into the Executioner. A beautiful bar barrel to pull the Boss Bandit back to make the Ram Rider go in front. And then also you can notice how the Mighty Miner forced out a Berserker from the opposite lane. He lets the Furnace die just so that he can get his King Tower activated. And the opponent, if you also noticed, just used his Snowball as well for the Mighty Miner. So because of all of this extra elixir the opponent spent, and the fact that the opponent doesn't have Berserker, doesn't have Snowball, doesn't have enough elixir for an Evo Executioner, he instantly went for the Hog Rider and got a ton of damage. He basically punished from a macro level, and it was just a really smart play. Goes for a Bar Barrel as well, so the opponent doesn't have his Bar Barrel or Berserker in cycle, so he knows that that Bar Barrel is going to connect to the tower. Also doesn't have a Snowball, so there's no cheap response to the Bar Barrel. And here the opponent is sort of like in a bad situation. So he goes for a Ram Rider in the back. This cannon placement, if you guys didn't know, if the Ram Rider is placed on either the middle tile or the inside tile of the bridge, this cannon placement will pull the Ram Rider. It's quite useful to know that, especially against Heka Ram Rider. It can sometimes help with dealing with split lane pushes. He goes for a Hog, and since the opponent went for an Evo Executioner so far behind the King Tower, it doesn't actually have the knockback effect, and so the Hog gets a ton of damage, and now the opponent is sort of banking on the fact that he has his evolutions and he's just going to try and take the tower. So nice ability by the opponent. Opponent goes for this Evo Snowball. Notice as well that WL Muhammad cycled his cannon early, just so that if the opponent now goes for a Ram Rider, he's ready. So if the opponent is now trying to outcycle, because the opponent went for a Ram Rider in the back, right, just to try and outcycle. But if he tried to get another Ram Rider in the opposite lane, well, he's already back to cannon. Yeah, opponent gives up. It's a pretty straightforward game. You know, he's pulling this off at 2800, which is at this point of recording, top 200 in the world. And he's doing this like it's nothing, making it look easy. Up next, we have a matchup that I personally struggle a lot with. It's Hyperbait. It just gets really complicated knowing how to defend all of the different cards, and there's just so much spam and so much to keep track of. So we're going to try and break down what he does. This was ridiculous. He literally predicted the opponent going for a Goblin Barrel, and then therefore went for his Mighty Miner and prediction bombed. That's crazy, man. I mean, so that comes down to a few things. First, he instantly recognized his opponent's deck, and then he probably knew that his cycle was bad. You know, he didn't have his Bar Barrel in cycle, and so he just took it. Just took the risk going for his Mighty Miner behind. Beautiful Mighty Miner ability. Like, predicted the opponent's Ice Spirit and literally takes not even half the tower, 3/4 of the tower, just with that one outplay. I mean, this game already has been so high level and it's been 1 minute into the game. That Mighty Miner is an MVP. It's actually an MVP. Opponent goes for a Goblin Barrel, and he doesn't have his Bar Barrel in cycle, so he goes for skeletons, goes for a hog, basically just whatever he can just to stop as much damage as possible. And yeah, at this point, basically just needs good defense. Now the reason I've included this game in the video is because just because he has a lead, you're going to see how he defends. Okay, this is a really important point. You notice this cannon placement? It basically means the Dark Goblin can never snipe it without crossing the bridge and the tower hitting it. But the one drawback of this cannon placement, by the way, it's the same cannon placement used against Golem. The one drawback is that wall breakers won't go to this cannon, so that's why he went for that E-Spirit to push the wall breakers towards the cannon. It's a nice interaction you guys can learn, and it's a very, very high level thing to do. You really don't need to in most cases, but it is optimal. Like if you're trying to play absolutely optimal, that's how you do it. You just need really fast reflexes, which is really what this matchup comes down to. It's not exactly rocket science, it's just, it gets very, very complicated trying to defend everything. So in my experience, the toughest thing about defending this matchup is when they go for their dual lane Evo Goblin Barrel push. And that's where you want to know all the different ways of defending the Goblin Barrel. So here he goes for it in one way. Going for your E-Spirit for the Evo Barrel and then using your Bar Barrel onto the normal Goblins is the typical way of defending. You can also use your Earthquake on the Evo Goblins, or either side, but the Evo Goblins, because they get one shot by it. That's also sometimes necessary, especially if you're not running E-Spirit. You can also go for your Evo Cannon right in front of your King Tower, and that will also really help you out. Alright, this next matchup, I think hundreds of you guys in all my videos in the comments have asked me to cover more of, and so that's what we're going to be doing. He's playing against Recruit's Fireball Bait. And I want to start off by saying this is an incredibly tough matchup to win, and so if you're losing it, don't worry, don't get too frustrated, because honestly everyone loses it more often than not. But you're going to see how he manages to win. He pulls off some absolute miracle in this game. So the first thing is, how do you defend Recruits? Really what you want to do is you want to try and get rid of the shield and then pop the Mighty Miner Bomb, or the other way around, use the Mighty Miner Bomb to get rid of the shields and then go for like a Bar Barrel or something. But that's kind of what you do, is that you do that in one lane, you get rid of the shield in one of the lanes of the Recruits. By the way, the opponent messed up Cage, and so he punishes the placement. Goes for a Bar Barrel as well to try and keep his furnace alive, but that's sort of why he went for a hog there. But anyway, to defend Recruits, you go for one side, you just get rid of their shield, and then you also go for your Mighty Miner, and then you can pop the bomb. Now you can also go for your Mighty Miner up high in the middle at the bridge, and then pop the ability so it hits all of the Recruits. It sort of depends on what your opponent pushes. Here he does take some damage, but overall it's better, I think, to take more damage and get some in return than just never being able to break through. Just because if you try too hard to defend everything and try and have perfect defense, you will never have offense in this matchup. It's just extremely difficult. Evo Furnace is really nice as well. So he goes for his Evo Furnace, he uses the skeletons just to make sure that the Recruits are clumped up so that the Fire Spirit hits them all. Opponent has Fireball, which definitely sucks that you're playing a Furnace, but it's not the end of the world. You know, he is down a lot, but you're going to see that it just comes down to not giving up and just being ultra precise and keeping track of your opponent's cycle. So the things you want to keep track of are, of course, the Evo Cage, the Flying Machine, and the Zappies. The Flying Machine, because it's like if they go for Recruits and then they go for and you go for a cannon, just expecting them to go for pigs, then usually they'll go Flying Machine just to snipe it off. And so you need to be paying attention to when they're going to go Flying Machine in the middle. You want to keep track of the Zappies, because if you can outcycle that, or rather if you outcycle the Cage, you know they're going to go Zappies for your hog, because that's their second hog counter. Assuming they're not going to use Recruits. Now this is assuming you've outcycled them, or they don't have Elixir. In most of the case, you don't even outcycle the Recruits. You just go when they don't have Elixir for 7 Elixir Recruits. So here you can see he's sort of fighting against a brick wall. He hasn't managed to break through, but he's keeping his chances alive. He's not giving up, and he went for his hog there. I think he got it just whilst he had 3 card cycles before the Mighty Miner died. But he's taking Earthquake value. He's trying to get as much value as possible, trying to keep his furnaces alive for as long as possible, and just waiting for his opportunity. You just got to be patient, and you're going to get maybe one chance in the game to get like a nice hog to the tower. And if you can do that and you capitalize fully with good defense, you'll win the matchup. So he goes for his Mighty Miner, he has a Furnace. By the way, notice this cannon placement, he just plays it one tile higher than you would like against tanks. Notice how he went for a Hog. Beautiful Hog Rider, right? Not only does he have 3 card cycle during that Hog, he went for the Hog whilst the opponent went for his Pigs, so that he would go when the opponent had no Elixir. Because if the opponent went for Pigs and he also has Recruits and everything else, he's probably not going to have Elixir. So then the opponent goes for this pretty terrible cage, mainly because it's being tanked for, there are things distracting it. And so this just gives WL Muhammad a free Hog and then also a free Earthquake, because now he can try and outcycle it. So the opponent knows this, so he's just stacking the lane, just saying, okay, if you want to try and outcycle me, now you have to go into a Furnace, Bar Barrel, he's just cycling cards. And so WL Muhammad's like, yeah, I can't really try and break through this, because if you do, even if you get 1 Hog, the counter push will be too much. So he resets with a Furnace in the back. You'll notice how he's going for these Furnaces in the back, it's quite important. Just because the Furnace in the back, it just keeps spawning Fire Spirits, keep demanding a response, and stops the opponent from going in too much. Again, the same cannon placement, up high, Bar Barrel, just dealing with the Pigs. Now he has 2 Furnaces. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. 2 Furnaces. Evo Furnace is always going to get spelled down, so don't worry too much if it dies. Beautiful Evo Cannon on offense. Look at that. That Evo Cannon on offense is what won in this game. Bear that in mind. The opponent had Zappies, and the opponent had an Evo Cage, but he broke through because not only did he go for the Earthquake, he also went for the Evo Cannon. You've got to pay attention to those interactions. That Evo Cannon plus an Earthquake will kill Zappies, and then obviously the cage popped. GG's, crazy game. Alright, next up, we got another game against Golem, and I'm covering this deck twice just because it's so popular in the meta right now. I think I play it 1 in every 3 games, and so it's really important you guys learn how to beat this and how you defend it, because this deck actually does really well against Golem if you play the right, the right cards. If you don't, I still lose it from time to time because I make mistakes, but if you learn how to play it properly and don't make the mistakes that I'm making, or that you're going to see he doesn't make, you'll win. So he goes for a Mighty Miner Bomb, just clears up the minions. Minions are so annoying because they do so well against Hog as like a secondary Hog counter, because the opponent has Mini P.E.K.K.A, but then the opponent can also go for minions, he can also go for his Evo Witch, his Goblin Machine. All of these cards do pretty well against Hog. You notice how he popped the ability first on the minions, and then he went for it again on the Goblin Machine. He's just constantly forcing out responses from the opponent. Now remember at the start of the video I said he's trying to get a King Tower activation? Here in this game he actually pulls it off. So he gets a really nice King Tower activation off of the Goblin Machine, and if possible that's something you should pay attention to try and pull off in single elixir. In double elixir it's going to be too late. By that point they're going to be building up much bigger pushes, and it's going to be very rare you're going to get a sole Goblin Machine. Usually they'll go Goblin Machine Vines or Goblin Machine Mini P.E.K.K.A or Minions or something. So in single elixir, pay attention to try and get that King Tower activation and memorize that E-Spirit placement. Here, I mean, he's just applying pressure, but you're not really hoping to get that much damage. He actually does get his Hog to the tower, which is surprising, but you're not really going to be able to in a lot of matchups. It's going to be very, very difficult for you to get your Hog to the tower. So don't worry too much if you can't. Just focus on having good defense and punishing their cycle. And more so than that, just making sure you're forcing out as much elixir as possible. The one beautiful thing you have is the Mighty Miner can keep swapping lanes, and they have such a heavy deck, they don't really have cheap cards to deal with the Mighty Miner. And then you also have your Furnace, which you can keep playing in the same lane or opposite lane, depending, just to keep, like here, you see how he popped the ability, now the opponent has to defend both lanes. He also went for a Hog so that his Evo Furnace stays alive, so whilst he's applying pressure, he's also keeping his Evo Furnace alive, which basically just took care of this whole push. All he had to do was Bar Barrel. So, okay, Evo Furnace he uses for the Evo Baby Dragon. You don't want to tank an Evo Baby Dragon, that's a bit too much damage. Goes for that cannon placement. Remember I mentioned this earlier, this is an interesting cannon placement. Goes for his Mighty Miner in the back. Why does he not play up high directly on the Golem? Well, first of all, it's just going to get Vines. Second of all, he wants 3 card cycle for absolutely as long as possible. Gets a second cannon down by using 3 card cycle. He's going to pop that Mighty Miner ability any second now. There you go. Uses a Bar Barrel for the Evo Witch, and he's defended both lanes about as well as you possibly can. Again, it's not the kind of matchup you're going to take 0 damage, so don't try and flawlessly defend. Just make sure you survive, and then you get your counter pushes. You can see how now he has 2 Furnaces in both lanes. Goes for a Hog, goes for an Evo Cannon on offense. That's a big thing people just don't do enough. Maybe you're too scared to do it against Golem because you think you need it for defense. Your Evo Cannon and that barrage is like oftentimes part of your win condition. We saw it in the last game, where you have to use it in order to break through. Still has another furnace down. You can see how pretty much at all points in the game, after single elixir, he has a furnace on the field. He just keeps applying pressure, keeps spawning fire spirits, so either the opponent has to take tons of damage, or they have to keep playing cards, and it doesn't really allow them to go for golems. You can see how the opponent isn't really going for a golem, because he knows the second he does, he's just going to apply too much pressure opposite lane. This was a good golem by the opponent. It was at the exact moment WL Muhammad went for his Mighty Mine in the opposite lane. Mighty Mine opposite lane is still fine because you have 3 card cycle forever and he can always pop the ability, which is what he does. Goes for another cannon up high. I think the reason this cannon placement is so strong is just because it allows you to have more space up high for this, like, for example, second cannon, which is just really useful. You want to stack cannons on defense because cannons, you need DPS because they have a lot of HP on their troops. From the mini P.E.K.K.A, the Goblin Machine, you really need that DPS, and so stacking cannons is kind of what helps you defend because your furnace doesn't do enough DPS to deal with all of this push. 322, at this point you can just Earthquake cycle. Notice a small detail, but notice how he went for his Mighty Miner first, just tank for everything, and then went for the Earthquake, just so he has 3 card cycle, he can spell cycle a little bit quicker. And yeah, he's back, Earthquake, GG's. And last but not least, we have WL Muhammad's game against Pig's Lightning. Again, it's been an extremely popular deck this season. It's really, really strong with the Evo Baby Dragon, especially with the Mighty Mine of 3 card cycle. It's one of the very few cycle decks that's kind of viable top ladder, and we're going to see how he beats it. It's actually a fascinating matchup because he's come up with some new cannon placements in this and just stuff that I've never seen before. So I'm kind of looking forward to breaking this one down. Okay, so far he knows what his opponent's playing. At this point, as soon as you see Mighty Miner Baby Dragon, that Baby Dragon is the biggest giveaway. Up till now, this could be a Hoggy Q mirror matchup, but as soon as you see the Baby Dragon, you know what deck the opponent is playing. This is going to be Pigs, this is going to be Lightning. They only ever really run Lightning as well. They never run this with Earthquake or anything. So he goes for a Hog. I would say in general this is your matchup, but it's definitely not easy, especially the later the game goes on, the more pigs they cycle. Fast pigs, it gets complicated. So first thing to notice is notice how he cycles a cannon. This is something you would never ever do if your opponent was playing Earthquake, but since the opponent is using Lightning, it's an extremely intelligent play to make, because how do they get rid of your cannon? Here the opponent logs it just because they have no other option. Either they do nothing and you have a cannon on the field which they can't get rid of, or they have to spend 6 elixir. By the way, this is a nice defense with Bar Barrel and Earthquake. Or they have to go for a 6 elixir Lightning, so a -3 trade, and then somehow they have to wait 1 elixir so that they have enough for their pigs, and then go for pigs, and by that point you can already get back to another cannon. Basically the point being, he can cycle cannons freely because the opponent can never really get rid of them with a spell. Okay, here's the start of what's kind of an interesting defense. This cannon placement, he plays it very frequently in this matchup, and then he goes for his Mighty Miner on that tile to push all of the pigs to the cannon. That defense, you're going to see him rinse and repeat multiple times in this game, and it's pretty fascinating to me because I've never seen that cannon placement. I mean, just in this video alone, we've learned 2 brand new cannon placements that are just very meta specific. I've never seen any of those tile placements being used until this game. So here he goes for this cannon placement just because of the Evo cannon. You want to hit all of the pigs, and it's kind of lower, so it gives your towers a bit more time to help out. But you can notice how he went for his furnace on the right side, and he goes for a Hog instant Earthquake. So in this matchup, you're just going to be instant Earthquaking, and then he's got this Evo furnace that's still applying tons of pressure in the opposite lane. Look at this, pre-placed his cannon. Then what he's trying to do is just wait, see what the opponent's going to do, plays his... That's really important. Let the Baby Dragon lock on the Mighty Miner, and then the Mighty Miner lock onto the skeletons. You see how he did that? Also, remember at the start of the video I said he uses his Mighty Miner bomb very frequently against Baby Dragons? That's a perfect example of it. It's a very useful thing to do to pop your Mighty Miner ability. It does tons of damage to a Baby Dragon, and therefore it allows you to also force out more of a response from your opponent in the opposite lane. So far he has a beautiful lead. Again, he's stacking cannons. You would never do this if your opponent had Earthquake. Goes for skeletons and then will do the same thing. Mighty Miner up high. Like, you'll see how he does the same form of defense over and over again. Instantly goes for a Hog and Earthquake because he knows his opponent has to go in. Then because he had 3 card cycle from the Mighty Miner, he just goes for another cannon. beautiful defense, you know, attacking whilst defending. That's a classic trait of a good cycle player, is being able to attack and defend at the same time. Opponent now tries to just fully defend and successfully does so without using a cannon, so he just needs to defend now. So he goes for his bar barrel. Bar barrel is a pretty effective tank, by the way, against baby dragons as well when you need it. You've seen him do it a few times in this game, but if you don't have your mighty miner, then just use your bar barrel. Instantly goes for a hog, instantly earthquakes. You see how many times he does that? Also goes with his bar barrel. Now it doesn't work out, but especially later in the game, it's a pretty useful play. Goes for another Evo Furnace. Look at that, cannon placement again. Goes for a hog, just attacking whilst defending. Basically he went for that hog so that if the opponent went for pigs, they would all pretty much be unsupported. The pigs would just go in front of everything, because everything would be pulled back by the hog. 3 baby dragons, but they all get hit by the mighty miner bomb. He prediction goes for a bar barrel just to hit everything, and then he gets an Evo cannon down. Baby dragons are a bit tough to defend, but really just using that mighty miner bomb and then also your furnace, pretty simple. I mean, dude, he played so damn well this game. I'm so impressed, and you know, I hope you guys are too. If you like the video, make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.